So here, we're going to go over how to add a new weapon to FPS Animation Blueprint v2, including new meshes and animations. So here I've just got a fresh copy of the asset open in Unreal Engine 4.26, and I've just added a asset pack here already, which is the animated short stroke assault rifle by Iron Belly Studios, available here on the marketplace. So to start, to add a new weapon, we just need to go into Blueprints, Data Assets, Weapons, Guns, and create a new data asset, these red files here. We can just duplicate the one that's closest to the weapon that we want. In this case, the short stroke is a rifle, so we can just duplicate the rifle data asset here and just name this short stroke. Open that up. And to begin, we can just set the skeletal mesh as a short stroke mesh, and we'll just change the name to short stroke. Save that. To be able to pick up a weapon in your level, just go to Blueprints, Pickups, and choose the Pickup Gun actor here and just drag it in. And select your short stroke weapon here. And we can test that out. Now, as you can see, that doesn't look quite right. What we need is a base pose for this weapon so that it's held correctly. So, before we can do that, we need to retarget the animations provided by this pack to the FPS skeleton. To do this, we have to go in here, find the mannequin skeleton that comes with this pack, open it up, and select the humanoid rig under the retargeting manager. Then we can go back to the animations, select all of these, retarget, and duplicate. Select the FPS SK mannequin skeleton from the list and choose a folder. I'm going to create a new one and just call it short stroke, just for convenience, and hit retarget. Now what you'll see is for this specific asset, it complains about needing a preview mesh. This won't usually be required, but in case you get this pop-up, you can solve it just by going to your skeleton, selecting a preview mesh, clicking apply, and saving. You can then attempt the retarget again. Great. Now that that's done, we can go over to our animations folder and save all. Now, if we open up this idle animation, we can see that looks fine. But if we show the bones, we can take a closer look. This system requires proper use of the IK bones to function. That is IK hand gun, IK hand L, and IK hand R. What we need is for the IK hand L and R bones to perfectly match the hand L and R bones. We can check that here and see that indeed the IK hand L and R bones do match the hand R and L bones. That's great. However, the IK hand gun bone is placed incorrectly. It also matches the hand R bone perfectly. What we need is for it to be at the weapon mesh's root bone. Now, most animations you get from the marketplace will look like this. Animations gotten from outside the marketplace, such as, say, from Mixamo, may not even have the IK bones keyed at all, and they'll be floating out here in the default position. So we'll need to fix this. First, let's add to the IK hand gun bone a preview asset, the short stroke rifle, and we can see that it's clearly not facing the right way. What we need to do is rotate this around correctly and then position it so that it's sitting about in the right position in the hands. So we'll turn off the rotation and movement constraints here, and we'll just get an idea of exactly how this is supposed to be rotated. So here I am going into the orthogonal views. Now the weapon is not very easily visible as this light gray object here. But what we can do to align this is actually to just use the gizmo itself. So we're going to try and place the center of the gizmo on this purple line, and then we can actually just use that to try and line up the points on this circle with that purple line to try and get it as closely as possible to straight. There we go, that'll do it. So we'll head back to perspective mode. And then we'll just position it into the hands. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now, if we take a look at the skeleton again, the AK hand gun bone is now at the weapon root, which is what we want. It's offset from the hand, so that when the weapon is attached, it doesn't need to be manually placed. It will just automatically be in the correct spot, no matter what. However, moving the AK hand gun bone has moved the IK hand L and R bones, as those are child bones to IK hand gun. This can be fixed in Engine 2, however, there are some issues with trying to set the rotation, resulting in inconsistencies, and it's a bit of a hassle. This also won't work for full animation. What we're going to do instead is export this out and fix it in Blender, which is not a very difficult process. I'll walk you through it. So first we need to save out what we have here as a pose. So we'll go create asset from current pose. We'll just select our animation here and we'll just call this AS short stroke base pose. So here we have a one frame animation. That's just our base pose. Now the reason we need to fix the IK hand L and hand R bones is because those are used by the system to track the hands to the weapon. By having them all the way out here, your hands are going to be in some pretty funky positions. So first we'll just set the base pose in the data asset for our short stroke weapon. Under animation data, animation set overrides, we'll just select our base pose here and save. So we can test this out. The weapon is sitting in roughly the right spot. However, you'll notice that the hands are all the way out there. The left arm in particular is all the way off to the side. This matches this bone here. So this is what we need to fix. In order to do that, just go to your base pose, asset actions, and export. Select your location and save it. Now open Blender, obliterate the default cube, and import FBX. Select your animation. Now, it's going to look pretty funky. There's no mesh, the bones are all pointed completely the wrong way. Don't worry about this. It's not suitable to animate directly on. However, for the purpose of fixing an existing animation like this, it's perfectly fine. Now there's a few things we need to do. Importing an FBX like this will result in a couple of strange things. This yellow line here means that there is a key between frame 1 and some place behind it. This, as it turns out, is on a negative key outside the integer range, and so we can't actually reach it. To get around this, we're just going to select the animation tab here, open the dope sheet, and action editor here. With all of your bones selected, you can select A, hovering over this window to select all bones, and then over this window, hit A again to select all keys, and delete. Click here to create a new action. Click the shield, and rename this to something you can identify it by. Base pose will do. Make sure you select Auto key, and hovering over this preview window, press I, location, and rotation. This will key every bone's current position to a different channel. This is how we want it to look. Now, in order to fix this, what we want to do is take the IK hand bones and move them to the regular hand bones. This is a fairly simple process. Select this bone floating out here, and it should be called IK hand L. Click on this blue icon on the side, bone constraints, add a new one, copy transforms. The target, if you click on this eyedropper, you can select the skeleton, and the bone should be hand L. And you'll see it snaps to the hand L's position. Now select this big backwards facing bone here, and make sure IK hand R is selected. IK hand gun occupies the same space, so if you see this, just select again and it should be IK hand R. Add bone constraint, copy transforms, eyedropper, skeleton, bone is hand R. And this is now done. This is ready to export. So we go export, FBX. Make sure selected objects only is turned on. In armature, turn off add leaf bones, and in animation, NLA strips and all actions are turned off, and simplify is set to 0. Select the animation you exported from Unreal and choose export. You just want to carefully take note of the IK hand gun's position here in world space. It's a good idea to note these down in, say, a notepad file or something that you can access for later use. Now, back in Unreal, just drag in your animation, and that should re-import directly back onto your existing base pose. Alternatively, you can select re-import with new file and choose it from the list. This may be grayed out on generated poses, however, which is why you can also drag it in from another window. So we'll just open this up, and as you can see, the pose is now correct. The IK hand gun bone is exactly where we want it to be on the weapon root, and the IK hand L and R bones are on the hand L and R bones, as we want. This base pose is now ready to use. However, you'll notice that it actually imported with a bunch of extra frames for some reason. This can happen sometimes, but we don't need those. So we can remove a bunch of extra frames. Now, right-clicking somewhere on the timeline gives you a weird range. So we can just drag this bar here and find somewhere along the time frame where we can select remove from frame 2 to the end. And this will leave us with a 1-frame animation. Perfect. Be sure to make sure that you select from frame 2, otherwise you'll remove all frames and it won't act quite right. So, save this, and we can test that. Perfect. Now, you can see with this animation, the shoulder is showing in the corner there. That is just the way this particular animation was made. As you can see, the shoulder is animated really far forwards. That's just a quirk of this specific animation. But otherwise, you can see the weapon is being held correctly. There's a couple of issues you may notice, however. The bullets are spawning from somewhere at the bottom of the gun, and the aim down sight system isn't quite working right. To fix this, we just need to add a few sockets to the weapon skeleton itself. So if we go back to our short stroke folder, meshes, weapons, and open the short stroke skeleton file, go to your skeleton tree, and add a few sockets. We'll call these muzzle, sights attach, and sights center. The muzzle socket is used for the bullet spawn point, the muzzle flash, and also the point at which muzzle attachments are attached to the weapon. You can use sockets or bones for this. So just place the muzzle roughly about there. Go sights attach. This socket is what the sights attachments will be attached to. And you can preview how this looks by adding a preview asset, and we'll just choose the dot sights, for example. That'll do it. And then sights center is the point that you want your crosshair to align with when aiming down sights without a weapon attached. Yeah, that looks about right. So save this, and we can try that out again. As you can see, bullets and muzzle flash are now spawning in the correct location, and aim down sights works. As you also saw, attachments are attaching to the correct spot. Now, if you want to remove the sights as a default attachment, you just go back to your data asset, and in attachments, just clear the sights attach. Perfect. Now, there's a few extra things we need to do. You may have seen that there's an incorrect mesh here. That is the default magazine attachment. Every weapon needs one of these. However, not every weapon needs a mesh attached to this. If we have a look at our short stroke weapon here, there's no separate magazine mesh. So we want to use a default attachment that doesn't include a mesh. To do this, we'll just go back to the FPS blueprints folder, data assets, attachments, and just find the default magazine rifle. Duplicate this, rename it, open this up, and just clear the static mesh. You can also set your magazine size and other variables here as needed. So we'll save that, close it, and we'll just set that here. As you can see, that's now fixed. But that animation isn't quite right. This pack does come with its own animations, and we would like to be able to use those. So, we go back into here, and we want to be able to use our reload animation. But, as you can see, the IK bones are also placed incorrectly here. So we'll have to go and fix these as well. We can do so using a very similar process that we use to the base pose. So, export the animation you want to fix. So just like before, import FBX and grab the reload animation. Now, to fix this, first, we need to sort out the keyframes issue like before. So find the last frame that has a key on it, adjust the range so it encompasses the entire animation. And what we want to do is if you hold tab and go to object mode, with this skeleton selected, you can go object, animation, bake action. Make sure this range matches the range of keys here. Disable only selected bones, select clean curves, and pose. Select OK. Give it a moment to finish. And if you select your dope sheet, action editor, select this shield. We'll rename this to reload. And as you can see, all of the bones are now keyed correctly. What we need to do now is go to pose mode. Hold tab, pose mode, and you want to select IK hand L, hold shift, click here twice. That will select IK hand gun, hand L, and hand R. What we want to do is move to frame 1, select all the keys on these channels, and delete. Select auto key by turning that button on, and press I, location and rotation. Now what we need to do is select IK hand L, and like before, add a bone constraint, copy transform, root, hand L. Select IK hand R. Again, if handgun is selected first, just click it again and it'll cycle through. Bone constraint, copy transform, select the skeleton, hand R. Now this time, with handgun, we're going to manually input its location using the coordinates we grabbed earlier. So if you press N to show this details panel here, we can copy the numbers here, and this will now be in the correct position. To fix the rotation, however, a few extra steps are going to be necessary. If we go back to object mode, Shift A, and add an empty. Here I'm going to use the arrows, as this gives us a nice convenient axis. We can see that Y is facing backwards and Z up. We want to add an object constraint. Child of, select the skeleton, and choose IK handgun. It'll automatically snap to the IK handgun's transform. What you'll be able to see is that its transform is still 0, 0, 0, because now it's relative to IK handgun. Select Object, Apply, Visual Transform, and now remove this constraint. And now we have this location in world space. Now we just want to apply that in reverse. Select the skeleton, pose mode, IK handgun. Make sure you select the right tab here, bone constraint, child of this empty. Go back to object mode, select your axis, and set its rotation to 0, 0, 0. And now we see Y is backwards, Z is up. This means that IK handgun is now oriented correctly. Click on the skeleton again, go back to pose mode. With IK handgun selected, pose, apply, visual transform to pose, and remove that constraint. We're now done with this axis, so we can hide it. Now what we need to do is, with IK handgun selected, add a new bone constraint, child of, and this time select the skeleton and hand R. And now, just to be safe, you can select all, I, location, and rotation. The reason we want this constraint is so that when the hand moves, the IK handgun, and thus the weapon, will follow. Now it's a little difficult to tell exactly what's happening here with this mess of weird bone rotations, but as you can see, these green bones, the IK bones, are following correctly. This animation is now ready to export. Select File, Export FBX. Make sure Selected Objects is on, Add Leaf Bones is off, NLA and all actions are off, and Simplify is 0. Select your reload and export. Back in Unreal, find your reload animation, re-import with new file, and select your reload from the list. That's now ready to use. If you've noticed your animation takes a long time to import and you have way too many frames in here, you can solve this by going to Import Settings and setting a custom sample rate. The sample rate is the frames per second that the animation was originally animated in. You can find this by hovering over another animation and finding the frame rate, which is equal to 60. So here, we'll just type in 60, and you can hit re-import. That should fix your frame issue. But now, if you play this, you can see, well, that plays correctly. There's a few other things that need to be done before this can be used by the system. All animation sequences outside of the base poses need to be additive animations. So here, we'll just select local space in the additive settings, selected animation frame, and for the reference, we need to choose our base pose that we created earlier, and save. Additionally, the montage needs to be set. That's obviously not right. So we just need to make sure we select our base pose as the preview base pose here as well. Additionally, we need to make sure our slots are selected correctly. So select head, duplicate this twice, and for each, select left arm and right arm. Save this, go to your data asset, and in animation data, animation set overrides, we can select our reload montage here and save. As you can see, our animation is now playing correctly. You may have noticed a couple of things still going wrong, however. Our ammo didn't refill. To do this, you just need to add an AnimNotify to the notifies track. Skeleton notifies reload ammo. We want to place this right at the point where the magazine is fully inserted into the weapon, right about there. So we'll just drag this over and place it about there. Additionally, if we add a new track, we also just want to add a new notify state, and it's the weapon pose override. Drag the beginning to the start of the animation, and the end point will be when the hand returns to its resting position under the weapon. So right about there. This is now completely ready to use. Okay. But you may have seen that the magazine is still staying in the weapon. Well, we need to set up the weapon to use its own animations. So, to do this, we'll go to our short stroke animation pack, weapons, and these are the ones we're after. So we need to make sure that this is being used correctly. First though, we need to create an animation blueprint for our weapon. Find the short stroke skeleton, hit OK, and we'll just name this AnimBP short stroke. Open this up, and this is very simple. We'll just add the default slot node and plug this in. Compile, save, and make sure in weapon animation set, this is the actual weapon animations themselves, we just select that animation blueprint here. We can also clear these, as animations for other weapons won't work here. Let's select our reload animation montage and select that. Now that's not quite right. You won't always run into this problem, but for some reason this asset pack has different rotations for the base mesh and for its animations. This is a strange problem, but it's not too difficult to solve. We can essentially cancel out that difference in rotation by going into the animation blueprint and just adding one extra note here. Apply additive, plug this into the additive pin, and connect that there. File and save. Don't worry about these notes here, that's completely fine. The animation sequence now, just like with the character, we need to make it additive. Local space, selected animation frame, and in this case, we can just use the idle animation, as this is just a blank animation that does nothing. It's essentially a base pose already made for us. If you don't have one like this, you can make a base pose by just simply create animation reference pose. Back to our reload. We want to grab your base pose or suitable animation and select that as your reference pose here. Save, and in the reload montage, select the same base pose as the preview base pose here. Click Save. And now, that will work correctly. These processes should work for just about any animation you can throw at this, so long as you set your additive settings correctly and ensure that your slots in your montages are placed in. This will work just fine. Well, I hope that's worked out for you. We'll go over more details of how to customize your weapons in future tutorials, including adding and creating new attachments, changing variables, and adding sound effects to certain animations, such as your reload animations. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.